Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Another week, Mark.
Yeah, things going well.
Going well enough. It's been busy. There's always always stuff coming out and always stuff new. So just trying to keep up. And then one of the things I love doing is answering questions from people. I hang
Yeah.
out in discussion forums, and Google has a community Discord server that I like hanging out on. And I got an interesting question from a user uh,
Okay.
several days ago now, and he and I bounced around a couple of ideas in to solve this. But I kind of wanted your perspectives on it, and I thought it would be a good topic for discussion.
Okay.
So the question that he sent it involves in this case Google TTS, Google Text to Speech,
Okay.
but the person had also repeated it with several other text to speech systems and ran into the same problem. And I'm going to put the text up on the screen because you know, it's a
Yeah.
text to speech issue.
Okay.
So if we see this phrase, I would read that as I love to read. I read every night before I go to bed. That sound about right to you?
Yeah, that looks like what that is.
Okay. And yet, if we run this through Google text to speech, and I happen to have that right here with me, conveniently. Let's hear what it sounds like.
I love to read. I read every night before I go to bed.
So I
So
love to read. I read. So it switched to past tense for the
it's
second
switched to
read.
past tense, but
Yeah.
that's grammatically incorrect in this case because the phrase, if you say it as I love to read, I read every night before I go to bed, that's grammatically weird in English. Now,
Yeah.
if it was I read every night before I went to bed,
Hmm.
that would be okay. Um, so the person asked, "How do I get it to sound correct?" What are the first thoughts you would have on how to get this to sound correct? The two of us being old voice developers.
Thanks. I was
Yeah,
going to say, it sounds like a job for SSML.
indeed it might. So, but how would we do that?
I guess it depends. Like if we're doing classic um, voice development, then we would handcraft the output and we would be able to add SSML tags and indicate that this word, the tense of the word, so we'd be able to mess with the SSML to get the output response. And it's pretty easy when you know that the response is going to be canned and this is the type of thing that you want to
So,
say.
so right. So with SSML, we've got a bunch of options. I mean, the first is we could just fiddle with the word. We could
Yeah.
make it look correct. We could put in text that is correct but looks wrong. Um, or we could use the say as tag in some cases. We could give it this, if I remember correctly, and I'd have to consult your great website to
SSML.guru.
thank you, SSML.guru, to see exactly how to do this. But we could give it potentially um, an alias,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But when I talk to the user more, and before I forget again, kudos to uh, Bonadio who asked this question and who engaged and gave us permission to talk about it. Their name will be in the credits. Um, the problem is that this phrase will be generated somehow, either by an LLM that's generating output text
Right.
or by a teacher who will be entering in this text and who needs to actually display it as well. So you can't fudge it so well, and a teacher doesn't necessarily know how to do SSML.
Okay.
So what approach do we have here?
Well, I've seen different implementations of SSML editors that are, you know, something that you could add some sort of not really markdown in the case, but there are things that you can tag or ways that you can via a UI turn something into something that would generate SSML for it. But then you get to the point, and the kind of the way that we solve this in the old Alexa and voice apps that we did is that you have a text that you display and you have the text that you speak, and
Right.
so it's two different strings.
Right. And for the odd cases where this actually happens, where you need this, it's fine. You obviously, a teacher is going to be reviewing all of any output anyway, we
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
We hope everything's not being generated by an LLM and then being sent directly to somebody. So in this case, it makes sense to allow for an editor to be able to, well, edit it and have that parallel markup of, have that parallel text. Now let's take this one step further. What if this was all generated? What if it was, the goal of it is that the person is going to speak something in Spanish, the LLM will somehow translate this Spanish into English and speak it back out to us. Let's ignore the input side completely because I don't want to go there tonight.
Yeah.
How do we deal with this? What routes do we have to deal with this?
Oh, so how are we going to deal with that for generative? That's kind of a tough one because if you just generate the straight text, then once again TTS is just going to read it off how it is.
How it ever decides to do it, right?
Yeah, and unless there was a way that you could have the LLM generate the speak text and the SSML and output that and basically return a well, and even if you only had one output and it had SSML in it, you could have a function, a regex that stripped out any of the XML based tags out of the text, so you could get back to regular text if you wanted to. So I guess you could try to have the Gen AI response also generate SSML as I guess.
That's pretty close to the solution I came up with.
All right.
My suggestion, though, is instead of saying have it generate the SSML, is convert the output to the phonemes of the output, and then we would insert those phonemes into SSML.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, so you could have just the phonemes for each of those. Very interesting. So it's just going to be in essence the what would be, I guess, whatever the different language formats are for phonemes. IPA, and I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my
X-SAMPA
head.
or something like
X-SAMPA,
that.
yeah. So yeah, so I guess you could have the text generated in that, and then just send that straight in to SSML for the text to speech to happen. Yeah, I could see that.
Okay, so I gave this a try. Just something quick and simple
Yeah.
using AI Studio, and let's take a look at it.
All right, this looks interesting.
Right. So we came up with the prompt: give me the following phrase using the X-SAMPA phoneme alphabet, and the phrase. And it thought I'm using the Gemini 1.5 Pro model, mostly because I know that it's really good and I can trust it and it works very well. And it gave us, at a glance, this certainly looks correct. If I scan it quickly, that kind of looks like read. And that also looks like read.
Yeah.
So that at least on the surface looks pretty promising. Let's feed that back into the code and see what we get.
I love to read. I read every night before I go to bed.
Hey, that sounds good.
That sounds good. Now, It wasn't perfect. Um, the SSML didn't really pause so much on the period, and
Yeah.
but I was really impressed. From a 30-second experiment that worked.
Yeah.
Then I said, okay, so that works in this particular case. What about the case where we're now using the past tense of read, where we intentionally wanted to say read? So let's try something like, I love to read. I read every night before I went to bed. Okay, you're not going to say I read every night. Well, you might say I read every night before I went to bed. But here's a case where using the past tense of it, I read every night before I went to bed, makes more sense.
Right.
Okay? So we try that and we get this one. And I don't need to run this
Hmm.
through the text to speech because it's identical to the one before.
So it's doing the X-SAMPA each word individually and not in the context of the overall sentence.
Well, I don't know that though.
Hmm.
And part of me wants to find a bunch of other good examples where this might happen and run them through. I mean, again, this was a 30-second prompt. That's one
Yeah.
line. You know, I don't know if it works and this is part of the challenge is that, even the person reporting it to me said, if you change the period to a comma, it works correctly.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's a bunch going on there. On the surface, it looks like maybe it works better. Maybe.
Maybe.
Hard to
Yeah.
tell, but maybe it works better. Maybe we need better prompting. Maybe this is a potential solution. But I kind of, it's the sort of thing where here we've got two AI technologies, though, one of which is very much a streaming technology.
Yeah.
The text to speech is meant as streaming. It's not doing the bigger understanding concepts, and one that can sort of take the time and has the skills to understand it
Yeah.
and maybe come up with a better pronunciation because it has that association correctly paired to it.
Yeah.
One of the other possibilities is for, that I considered, since Gemini is a multimodal model, was maybe we could have taken the output of the text to speech, feed that into Gemini and said, are there any grammatical errors here? If so, how do we rewrite it? How do we, I don't know. But this is the kind of case where I think a model like Gemini has the potential, at least, to add value to another model that is trained on something slightly different. This is where we can get multiple models working together to get the right output.
Yeah. Something else occurs to me is something that you might try, and I don't know if it would be something that would be via the large language model or via some sort of a code library. There are parts of speech libraries that will go
Ooh,
through and break a sentence off into different parts of speech. And I don't have a lot of experience with them, so I'm not sure if it would be able to break down like present tense, past, tense, etc. So there might be a way that you could either have that be a kind of the middleman, and so then you're presenting the maybe the sentence with the parts of speech to the large language model then to go ahead and do the X-SAMPA on that. So I wonder if that kind of that extra knowledge of what part of speech it was at the time that it was creating the X-SAMPA would be something. It also is just interesting where um, seems like there might need to be a new like a kind of a new generation of text to speech that you could have kind of descriptions of what tense the words were or different things like that and then have it translated or spoken differently.
yeah. Or, it occurs to me that we keep talking about models like GPT-4o and Gemini as being true multimodal. Why don't they generate the audio multimodally natively? I mean,
That's true.
they don't at the moment. but
Yeah.
it's not too hard to at least dream about having these things, generate them on their own without having a separate TTS
Step.
model
Yeah.
attached
Hmm.
to it.
True.
On the other hand, uh, it might just be that these models, that the complexity of speaking something does require that. I don't know. One of the things, though, that occurs to me is interesting is that there are more and more text to speech models that are out there that don't do SSML.
Yeah.
So, they take text and assume they have the right way of speaking it and don't give you any control over that at all. And maybe those are already borrowing some of the LLM schemes like what I just tried to do,
Yeah.
but maybe not.
Maybe they're just naive, right?
Right. And and you're kind of stuck, since you don't have any way to control them.
Yeah, and then you get like you're going along and things are going great in your conversation with your assistant, and all of a sudden you hear something and you go like, it's kind of like the fingernails on the chalkboard or the little like
Yeah.
a little twang or something like when a guitar string, something annoying. You're just kind of like, there's something off about this conversation.
Right. And you know what, and that's significant, when
Yeah,
you're having, an audio conversation, having the person, it's, I'm hopefully not going to offend too many people listening to this, but it's like talking to somebody and having them call it a nuclear power plant. And you're like, that's not, I mean, okay, but,
yeah.
you know,
Can you say that word a little bit clearer?
you know, but I think these things are important. And I think increasingly we're going to be needing to figure out ways to adapt our tools to work exactly the way we want them to,
Yeah.
with less and less supervision.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Given LLMs, we give up some control when we do LLMs, but then that means that they need to step up their game, especially in the area of voice
Yep,
response.
yep. Anyway, I think it was an interesting challenge, an interesting problem, but also an
Yeah,
interesting example of how we can pull in a lot of different tools and bring them together to solve this problem. And the LLMs don't need to be the be all and end all, but they could be a good component.
yeah, that's true.
So I'd love to hear if other people have thoughts about how to address this problem. How would you have addressed this problem? Um, yeah, different TTS systems behave differently. So, just saying, oh, mine handles that sentence perfectly. Well, might not for a different sentence. What are the possible tools that we have at our command to address these issues? So, feel free to leave us comments below. Find us on social media, and I'm sure we'll talk about this again another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Mark. That was a fun one.
Yeah, that was.